Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be doing a first in a 3-part series that will be coming out sporadically the rest of this month. I am having such a hard time coming up with content lately because normally a lot of my content comes from book reviews and unboxings, but a lot of things are book reviews and coming up with things that I like lately. But the books that I'm reading right now just are not like inspiring me. They're not inspiring content. So I was trying to come up with things that I wanted to do. So one of my friends at work, I was asking my friends at work, I was like, guys, I need something to put up on my channel that is kind of gonna like inspire some of the creative juices. And they were like, do some lists. And I was like, oh, that's actually a pretty good idea because I don't know if I've done favorites lists, least favorites lists of everything that I've read, because I just started BookTube last year, so most of my content is stuff that I read last year and stuff that I read this year so far. Nothing that really precedes that. So I thought it'd be really fun to do, like I said, a 3-part series, and this first one is going to be my favorite books of all time. The next 2 are going to be least favorite books of all time, and then after that, most surprising books. And for most surprising books, I just stuck with books that I really enjoyed because, I don't know, most surprising sad books, I don't know, I feel like it would be too depressing to think about because most of the time I have high expectations and then they turn out to be past. But who knows, this may be 4 parts if I have trouble coming up with other content. But anyway, we're gonna get into the video. Make sure you subscribe for more content so you don't miss any of these 3-part video things going on. Make sure to like the video, make sure to comment down below on the things I'm about to tell you. But this is gonna hopefully be a pretty happy video, so I wanted something to pep me up. So we're going to be starting at, I actually had 11. I was trying to do just 10 for each video, but I could not break it down to just 10. So coming in at number 11 of my favorite books of all time is going to be a thriller, and it is The Night Swim by Megan Goldin. When I say that I love this book, I made my husband read it, I made my best friend read it, which is actually hilarious because my best friend, I told her the title but not the author, and she's reading it, and I had told her like the basic premise, and she's reading it and she's like, this is nothing like what you told me. I'm so confused. I don't get it. And then it turned out she read a completely different book. So I felt so bad that I sent her an actual copy of the book because I was like, I'm sorry, you just read some random book that you found that had the same name as The Night Swim. So I thought that was absolutely hilarious. The Night Swim is such a cool book, and it's very hard-hitting for a thriller mystery kind of thing going on. We are following our main character, Rachel, and I feel like I read this at a perfect time because Rachel is a podcaster, and I started getting really into podcasts when I was doing this, and I had just gone through my second listen of Serial, and this felt very similar to Serial, and it just felt like the podcast section of this was done so phenomenally. I really appreciated that, and I thought it was really, really well done. But at the same time, we're not just sitting in a courtroom listening to court transcripts, etc. We're also going out into town, learning about the history, and going back and forth between the present day during this trial that's going on and our podcaster, and in the past where we're dealing with all the terrible things that happened back then as well. So everything obviously is connected. That is something that's very popular in thrillers now, but I feel like this thriller specifically has done it the best. The mix of current and past. This book just does it so well, and the little podcast excerpts actually break it up pretty well, so it's not just text after text after text. The podcast stuff kind of wraps things up in a nice little bow too, so it's kind of like this chunk of information that feels like you are reading a podcast. And I read it physically, loved it. My husband listened to it on an audiobook, and he loved it on audiobook as well, so both are really good. Coming in at number 10 is the duology, These Violent Delights. I don't know what else I can say. Chloe Gong is just like amazing. It's amazing. I know a lot of people had a lot of issues with this series. They thought it was kind of boring. They thought it was kind of too dense, too long, and they thought that the second book was a rinse and repeat of the first book. And I do a little bit agree with that, but I still loved it. Like, I loved the first book so much, I didn't care about going over kind of the same stuff in the second book. In this one, it takes place in 1920s Shanghai, and we are following 2 feuding families. It is a retelling of Romeo and Juliet, but with gangs, and it's so good. And I love it because the Romeo and Juliet characters are badasses, especially Juliet. She is just like kicking ass, taking names. She's not this wilting flower. She definitely has a say in everything that is going on, and she does not back down for anything. But there's definitely some miscommunication stuff going on because they each have to be a part of their opposing families, and it's incredibly difficult for them to deal with their family drama as well as dealing with the feelings that they have for each other, and they have to somehow balance it, and it's a mess. It's drama. And then what really brings the whole city together and kind of apart later in the second one is there has been a monster that has been unleashed upon this area in Shanghai, and they're trying to deal with it and figure out the mystery. And so it's like a monster mystery, actually, not murder mystery, but a monster mystery mixed with enemies to lovers, mixed with some political intrigue in there. So it's got so much cool stuff. There's so much depth to these books, and I absolutely adore them. The next on this list, I feel like this is not a surprise, but the Heartstopper series. I mean, Nick and Charlie are just literally everything. They're so cute. I have read through the series 3 or 4 times now because they're such a good palate cleanser. Like when I'm starting to feel down, when I'm having a bad day, when I am in a reading slump, this and I don't have it on this list, which is surprising actually. I feel like it should have been number 12. Lore Olympus would probably be 12. This and Lore Olympus are the 2 series that I will go back and reread over and over and over again just because they just make me feel so happy. And even though there's really difficult things that are dealt in both books, it feels so naturally done. Like it's not shoving in your face. It's not saying, hey, look at this. No, it's dealing with it in a mature, very understanding way, and it just makes you feel good. Like both of these series just make you feel good, especially Heartstopper. It makes you just like so happy. And now I feel like after I record this, I'm gonna go watch season 1 on Netflix because I actually did really enjoy it. I definitely like there's aspects of it that I like, but Heartstopper series book version I like better, but I like the side characters better in the series. So I like Nick and Charlie better in the book, but I like the side characters better in the TV series. I thought they were expanded upon much more, so I loved seeing more expansion on those characters. And I kind of hope that she does that in future volumes of Heartstopper because I loved seeing the side characters and their stories. Coming in at number 8, I feel like people are surprised this isn't higher, but it is the ACOTAR series. I think this has got to be on here. This is one of those books that I will just be able to reread over and over again. Doesn't matter what day it is. It doesn't matter how old I am. I'm gonna be rereading them. There's something about them that just like sticks with you. It sticks with you, and there's some parts between Fair and Reese that just like literally make my heart burst. Like they're so sweet together, and I'm not a smutty book reader, but there's something about them that just makes my heart just like so full when I just read their their little moments together, and it's just like I love them. I love them so much. And I don't have the same gushy feelings about A Court of Silver Flame, but I still loved it. Like it was still a 5-star, one of the best books I read last year, because there's something about the relationships. If you take all the smut out, all that stuff, the relationships are still so fantastic, and I feel like that's why I like these books so much, even if there is a ton of smut in them, because the relationships are so expanded upon that it's not all about sexual tension and stuff like that. It is genuine love that these characters feel for each other, and I feel like that's why people actually like these books so much. They feel like a lot of people are like, why would you like fairy smut, etc.? And it's like, I just love them. Like you could take away all the fairy stuff, all that stuff, and just have a plain book just about these 2 people, and I will literally scream still because I just love their relationship so much. Okay, Number 7 is also a romance, and it is The UN Honeymooners. I loved this book so much to the point I made my husband read it. This book is by Christina Lauren. I'm pretty sure it's like that writing duo or whatever, but I don't love everything that they do, but I love this one. I adore this book because it is so funny. This is an enemies to lovers romance that definitely is very heavy on the comedy side and just like awkward situations, and you'll literally be reading this book and go, oh my gosh, don't do it, don't do it, please don't do it, oh my gosh, it's happening. That's literally how you read this book. It is so funny, and I can see why some people don't like this, because some people don't want something like overly hilarious in their romance, but I ate this shit up. So we are following our main characters, Olive and Ethan. Olive she literally cannot stand to be in the same room as Ethan. Ethan is just Ethan. I don't know how else to describe him. They're forced into proximity because Olive's twin sister is getting married to Ethan's, I can't remember if it's brother or best friend. I think it's brother, but Olive's twin sister is very into saving money, and she was able to like win tickets for their honeymoon, win all this stuff for the wedding, etc. But something disastrously hilarious happens at the wedding, which forces Olive into taking this free vacation, and Ethan takes the other ticket. So they are going to be going on a honeymoon vacation together, and it's like fake dating and running into people, and just absolute hilarity ensues on this vacation, and then they have to bring everything to real life. So there is some like serious stuff that happens towards the end that they have to deal with because couple things, but it's just, oh my god, it's so funny. I actually really want to reread this now. I feel like that's how you can tell my favorites. I tend not to reread books, and I have reread this one twice. Everything on this list I've actually reread except for The Night Swim, I think, because I don't reread thrillers. Number 6 on this list is a young adult fantasy, and it's definitely got like nature fantasy vibes, which tend to be the books that I love the most for young adult, and it is Winterwood by Shea Earnshaw. Now, I could actually put both, like 2 of her books on here, but when I was deciding between the 2, I was like, let me just put Winterwood. But the other one, The Wicked Deep. The Wicked Deep could have replaced this. I loved both of them, but I would say Winterwood edges out The Wicked Deep just a little bit. But the vibes of this book, Winterwood was such a surprising read, and I absolutely adored it. The witch magic, the woods, and being like sentient, and the just difficult decisions in this book, and like the heartbreak, but also the hope, and it's just everything. It is, I literally can't say enough good things about this book, and I understand why people didn't like it, because a lot of people wanted something a bit different to happen at the end. I thought the ending was perfection, and I know a lot of people thought, oh, it's just a generic young adult romance slash fantasy book, and I just don't agree. I had such a good time reading this. I felt this was so different than a lot of the things that I read, mostly because the vibes were just so ethereal and magical, and I just vibed so much with this book. But we are following Nora Walker, and a lot of people say she's a witch, and she lives in this little like wooded area. Think if you read Riley Sager's House on the Lake, is that what it's called? House on the Lake? It's kind of like that idea, like there's like 3 or 4 families that live around this lake, but it's more rustic. So it's more, they're just kind of like regular people, they're not rich people. And they kind of look out for each other, and the woods are very special in this area. And a giant snowstorm is occurring, no power, all this stuff going off, cut off from the world. And she finds a boy who went missing weeks ago named Oliver, and she's kind of trying to unravel what happened to him in the woods, how he has made it to her, what happened, and she has to make very difficult decisions based on the events that occur. And it's so good, it's haunting, and I just absolutely adored this book. Coming in at number 5, I feel like this is not a surprise. I feel like the last couple ones are not going to be a surprise because I've talked about them plenty on my channel, but coming in at number 5 is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. There's something about this book. I get why people don't like it. This is not one of those books I don't understand why people don't like it. I 100% understand why people didn't like this. It is slow, meandering, but for me, this book was all about Addie. As long as I was reading about Addie, I didn't care what was going on. I loved her so much as a character. I don't know if I've ever loved a character. The number one spot, that is the only character I've ever loved more than Addie LaRue. But she's close. She's close. I absolutely adore her as a character. I love the story. I love that it's just not like this simple romance story. I love that it's not a real romance at all. That's what threw off a lot of people. A lot of people thought this was a romance. It is not a romance. It is Addie's story and the ramifications of her decisions and her trying to stand out in a life where she literally is told she is not allowed to. And it's just like, it is so hard hitting. And I just, and the ending was perfect. The ending was perfect. Another book that is haunting and will literally live with me for the rest of my life, and I want to reread this one so badly. Coming in at number 4, and there's a reason this isn't first, okay? This, I'm doing the whole trilogy because I loved the first 2 books. The third book was a bit of a letdown. My husband and I read this series together. I've actually read the first book 3 times already, and I plan to read it again. It is probably my favorite book separately, but because I'm counting like the other ones as series, I also am counting this one as a series because that's how my brain works as well. If I like a book, I want to like the rest of the series. So because the third book was not as good, and kind of was a bit of a letdown in some parts. It was very boring for most of the book. I kind of have to knock it down a couple points, but it's still one of my favorite series ever. And it's the Scallop Man series, with the first book being A Deadly Education. I loved this book. I cannot tell you how much I love this. And I feel like it's because of the main character, Elle. She is a character I could not get enough of. I felt so like seen by this character because I feel like she's an unlovable, lovable character. So it's so difficult to talk about because she is just this character that is prickly and feels like people are just constantly avoiding her, which they are. And it's because they're just terrified of her. They're terrified she's going to do something to them. They're terrified of just how she acts. They don't like her attitude. And I'm just like, I love her for it. I love her for it because she never tries to be someone she's not, but she's also like the kindest, most thoughtful person at the same time. So it's just such a interesting character. And I feel like not a lot of characters are written this way because authors are afraid to make such a dynamic character because they're afraid they're not going to be liked. Elle is unlikable and likable at the same time, and that's why I love her so much because she feels so real as a character. It's so good. It's so good, and it's just, I don't know what else to say other than that it's so fantastic. Coming in at number 3 is Ninth House. I mean, it's so good. I feel like I don't need to tell you guys what it's about. I love Alex Stern. I love Alex Stern the same reason I love Elle from A Deadly Education. Not surprising that these are my top books because I love this type of character that is just themselves unapologetically. Like, well, sometimes if they're too prickly, they're like, sorry, didn't mean that. 100% didn't mean that. But most of the time they're just like, this is who I am. I hope you can accept that. And so Alex Stern is, I adore her. I adore her as a character. I adore everybody around her. There is not a bad character. I don't dislike any of them. I loved Hellbent. I know a lot of people had some problems with it. I loved it. I thought it was a great extension of the series. And I'm pretty sure there's going to be a third one. And I cannot wait for the third one to come out. I am practically foaming at the mouth for the third one to come out. Coming in at number 2, we have the Six of Crows duology. And again, it's those characters that are lovable, but also not lovable at the same time. I adore them. I think the relationships in these books are so phenomenal. And I think this is the epitome of a heist series. The heist is done so well. It's almost like watching a movie. It's done that well. Young adult fantasy heist duology that goes along with the Shadow and Bone series, the Grishaverse. So that's pretty much it. my number one book, this was really, really hard to pick because like I said, I was kind of between Ninth House and Deadly Education, but because I counted them as more like a series, that's what knocked them down a tiny bit. Oh, but my number one, which one of my best friends is depressed about because she DNF'd this book, is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. This book wrecked me. This book absolutely wrecked me, and I feel like it definitely deserves a top position because it's also way out of my comfort zone. I don't read contemporary fiction. I don't read this kind of stuff, and I was beside myself while reading this book. I was sobbing. I was pleading with the book. I was dealing with every possible emotion imaginable while reading this book, and when I finished it, I just sat there just contemplating life because I felt like this monumental shift had occurred in my life after I read this book, and I don't know if any other book has done that because it just wrecked me. I don't know what else to say other than that. But this is following our main character Evelyn Hugo, and she decides to finally tell her story. She is this big starlet. Think if Marilyn Monroe lived to an old age, someone finally getting to interview her and learning her whole story from her. That's the equivalent of this person interviewing Evelyn Hugo. That's how big of a deal it is in their world. And so there are so many twists. And like it says, it goes through her husbands, but the point are not the husbands. Like, it starts off as the point, and then, but they're really just there to tell her story. Like, they are not really that important except for like one or two. What's really important is the stories within the stories that Evelyn is telling and the real life stuff that's going on current day. And it's just like, it's masterfully told. It is so brilliant that I didn't even realize it was guiding me to a point that it was. Like, when I finally reached this point, I was like, what is happening? What's happening? Like, I don't know what else to say about this book because it is almost a perfect book. I don't think a perfect book actually exists, but this is probably as close to a perfect book as you will ever get, to me. Obviously, this is all my own opinion, but to me, that it's perfect. It is absolute perfection to me. So I loved this book. It's easily got not easily, but pretty close to easy got the very first. And like I said, the only person who would beat out my love for Addie LaRue is Evelyn Hugo because of the story that she told. And again, another unlikable but lovable character at the same time. So these are my favorite books of all time. I feel like there's a lot of really popular ones on here, but there's a few that are less popular than are on here. I'm a sucker for popular books. Like, there's a reason that some of these are very, very popular, like Evelyn Hugo. There's a reason people love this book. So anyway, this was really fun to do. It kind of got me in like a good mood. It got me in a reading mood. Like, I actually really want to go upstairs and now read, which is really cool. But I also need to clean at the same time, so maybe not so good. But anyway, make sure you subscribe to my channel for the next 2 or 3 videos coming out, hopefully in the next coming weeks. And like the video, let me know what your guys' favorites are. I love hearing about your guys' favorites and what you think about my favorites, etc. Whatever you want to talk about, really. But that's all I got for you today, and I'll see you guys in the next video.